And your glasses.
And my glasses.
Okay, we're live.
All right, we are live. Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to today's Sustainable Change Alliance conversation on investing in a vibrant downtown. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad you're all here. Today, we'll be talking about the newly formed Economic Development Partnership, which was formed to invest in the economic sustainability of downtown Santa Barbara through proactive business recruitment and retention. So my name is Amy Cooper, in case you don't know me or we haven't met. I'm the founder of Plum Goods. I am a Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation board member, and I am also on the team for this Economic Development Partnership, working with SGV, Strategy, Growth, and Ventures, a consultancy firm. So that's a bit of background, and then a little description of SCA in case you aren't familiar or aren't a member yet. Sustainable Change Alliance is an impact-oriented, member-based, not-for-profit educational group. We are focused on impact investing, which we define as bringing financial and other resources to double and triple bottom line organizations that are trying to address big social, environmental, or health-related issues, and trying to do that in a sustainable manner. Some of these organizations are for profit, some are nonprofit, and some come from the independent sector. So I'd like to acknowledge the hardworking and dedicated fellow board members in this meeting. Thanks for being here. And thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't do this without you, as you know. Our founding sponsors are Argyle Capital Partners, Impact Family Office, Maps.com, and UBS. Platinum sponsor is Nixon Peabody Law Firm, and silver sponsor is Brashears Insurance. And just another reminder, if you're not a member of Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation, you're missing out. And we encourage you or your organization to join us on this journey. You can visit sustainablechangealliance.org, where you can sign up as a member. Okay, a bit of logistics. This meeting is being recorded. You are all muted. You can't unmute yourself unless the host unmutes you. You can, however, type any questions or comments in the chat box during the entire time of this presentation. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to type anything in the chat at any time, and I'll be checking that. Okay, so in one more little side note that I like to add is that I know we're discussing downtown today in terms of economic vitality, but I know I speak for all of us that our thoughts go out to everyone suffering from the myriad effects of the pandemic and all the healthcare workers on the front line. We are all aware that this is a health crisis and economic crisis locally, nationally, and globally. Okay, now let's get to the good stuff. I'm thrilled to introduce Keith Higbee, Managing Partner of Strategy, Growth, and Ventures. Hi, Keith. Hello. And Diana Pereira, founder of Kitchen 530. Hi, Diana.
Welcome.
Okay, so we're going to start with a little interview and presentation with me and Keith, and then we'll hear from Diana about her very exciting project, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But as I said, feel free to submit questions in the chat box anytime. Okay, so Keith.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
It's great to see you. What I want to start with is, of course, what we're talking about is an economic development partnership. And I would imagine that many people on the call have a bit of downtown revitalization webinar discussion fatigue. We've all heard and been involved in a lot of conversations. So in terms of this partnership, as I know, because I'm working on it with you, I know that we believe that first and foremost, an economically sustainable core business district is essential to the stability of a community and region. And I'm not sure everybody in the community fully understands the importance of that. And then with us on a precipice of 20% vacancy rate, which you'll get into the data, there's a real need to address this issue and have a really robust economic development initiative. So, and the other thing I want everyone on this call to take away from, if anything, is that what we're working on here is something that's based in data and facts, not just hopes and dreams, but in really what's going on with our demographics and our population and our visitor population and our downtown as it stands, so that we can really make some true movement forward based on a foundation of information. And also that we're not just filling vacancies, we are looking to strategically repopulate the street with intention. So that's what I know about the Economic Development Partnership, but I wanted to ask you, how did this get started and who's involved at this point?
Sure. So the Economic Development Partnership is a relatively new entity. Was really brought together, well, it was started by Amy and myself in terms of trying to get a movement going where we could actually join public and private partnership together of different organizations to help develop downtown economically. We found the Chamber of Commerce, the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce, was really the galvanizing force of helping us bring this together. After a few years of shopping this idea around to the city, to downtown Santa Barbara, it was really the Chamber that said they're going to help out and actually bring these entities together.
Yeah.
So the Economic Development Partnership is actually a chamber initiative, but it's really a joint partnership of the city, of the Better Together Fund, of the chamber, as well as some other entities that we're reaching out to, which is hopefully Visit Santa Barbara, Downtown Santa Barbara, and maybe other organizations that may want to join together and help develop downtown.
Yeah, but that goes to partnership. I want to get to how you and I met and why we started this.
So I'm a recent transplant to Santa Barbara. I've been here about 4 years as a 6 degrees of separation. Amy and I have actually been associated that my wife's family, my father-in-law used to work with Amy as well.
He was my boss, yeah.
He was her boss. I moved here. I'm very interested in civic things, and I realized that downtown Santa Barbara was going through some challenges. And what's interesting is the firm that I work for, that I'm one of the managing partners in, we are, the name is Strategy, Growth, and Ventures, but what we really are is we help businesses and brands and communities plan for growth and identify new ventures to explore. And really, we have a unique skill set that we can apply to almost any brand, business, or community and help them really plan for growth in the future. And when I was thinking about downtown, I said, listen, we can apply a lot of the processes and methodologies that we use in our day-to-day work and apply it to Santa Barbara. We can help actually bring the different constituencies together and plan for growth downtown. And so I did a little bit of investigation, identified Amy actually as the key person in spearheading the downtown initiatives at the time. That was about 2 or 3, 4 years ago, I guess. And I just walked into Amy's store, introduced myself and said, how can I help? And so I sort of brought some of the intellectual rigor and strategy to the process, a little bit of data mining, but Amy really brought the magic to the whole initiative. And maybe I'll actually turn it back to you and you can explain.
Well, I don't know about the magic. Yeah, I will say that you're too humble to say, or too, you don't like to brag about it. But when you first came to me, then I connected you with the city, and you and Nina Johnson and I put together the first community workshop, which was a really incredible event. How long ago was that? That was 1.5 years.
About 2 years ago. Yeah.
So Keith did all of that for free, and I did too, of course. And we did and then you came up with a huge report out of that, of data from what the community was looking for downtown, what the issues were, and what some of the solutions were. So that work had been done, which was a really enjoyable experience. And after that, he said, what else should we do? And I said, we need to curate the town, essentially. We need to repopulate the town, but with intention. And he said, yeah, I have a process for that. Yeah. So then we put that together. Yeah. So that's how we got to where we are in terms of why another organization, why this new partnership. I know that, again, I wish it could have fixed into any certain thing we already had established, but the more we looked into it, the more we really needed a new partnership that brought everybody together under one hub. So now we're here, and now the exciting part is the data and what we've found so far that is going to be new information for people on the call. So yeah, let's get to some of the information you have.
So for those on the call, I'd like to share just my screen. I promise I won't be talking through the slides too much, but let me just pop this up on the screen for you right now. And say that, the start of this process in terms of an economic development partnership is to really understand where do we stand today. And I want to say is we're not generating, well, we will be generating new data, but what we wanted to do was to understand really what were the issues that we're facing downtown. And there's really sort of 4 things that we looked at. Was really understanding what's our current business mix and what's the compositions of the businesses we have downtown. We also want to understand the demographics and psychographics of our community and our constituents. And then we want to understand, well, what do we know about the infrastructure of downtown from a commercial point of view? And what do we know about the behaviors of those that really frequent downtown? And then ultimately, we want to say, well, if we're going to build upon downtown, if we're going to make it a vital, vibrant downtown, we have to understand what are our core strengths and how we build upon those core strengths. So,
I mean, another great way to say it is we want to capitalize on all the investment that's already been made, because so many different groups, including the city and downtown Santa Barbara, have paid for all of these studies, but none of that information has been gathered together, analyzed, and then implemented.
Right. So what we did is we gathered, the 8 or 9 studies that were done specifically for Santa Barbara. So, primary studies down there from not only the design charrettes, which were maybe more creative, all the way down to the Cosmont report, which really talked about some of the more nuts and bolts of the real estate market in Santa Barbara. But then we also reviewed a number of other studies. There was 94 additional studies conducted nationally about what makes for a thriving downtown. And that was really to understand, do we have the right business mix? Do we have the right density, mobility, tourism, all those aspects that really come into play for Santa Barbara? Because what we wanted to do was to really question the current assumptions that we're hearing, as well as validate some of the facts that we think we know, which is sort of what brings us the report. And this is where I'm going to show some of the data that we have been finding. Some of this is not going to be a surprise to you, and there's certainly more data that's behind this. So if anybody has questions, we have time today to talk about it. Also very happy to talk about what we're finding downtown in more detail on a one-on-one basis with anyone on the call.
Oh, yeah, and I will say that I know for this that what we're determining downtown is the core business district of State Street from, is it Sola, Keith, to the waterfront?
Sola to the waterfront.
Yeah. So. And
we're also looking, so it's not just Sola, waterfront, and State Street, but it's also the streets on either side. We're really looking at as the downtown corridor. As it stands right now, we have about a 17% vacancy rate. And without any kind of intervention and with the rise of COVID in Q4, we're looking at a 20% vacancy rate, if not higher in Q1 2021. That seems most likely. There's probably no avoiding it, even with intervention in the next few months. In terms of our business mix, which is that pie chart you see on the screen, it's in flux. The impact of the pandemic in Q2 and Q3 really disproportionately impacted traditional retail. So we saw a lot of loss of stores in terms of gift shops, apparel stores, and that kind of retail. For the most part, bars and restaurants fared okay, well enough, we'll say. So right now, what we're looking at is a mix that is actually fairly well blended among the different types of businesses that we want to have downtown. But I will say that, with Q4 pending, I think we'll see many more business losses and maybe vacancies across different business types, at the end of the season, which is unfortunate. One of the problems we have downtown, and this is what I want to talk about, is that we have a fairly sparse population in the downtown corridor and within close proximity to the downtown corridor. So one thing we found in a lot of the studies that were done with Santa Barbara is, they talk about our total population of, 92,000 in the city with a larger population outside of it. But in reality, only about 12,000 are in close proximity, so within a half a mile downtown. What that means is that the downtown corridor really relies not only on those 12,000 residents, but visitors and daytime workforces to really bolster who's downtown. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's really anywhere from, 23,000 to upwards of like 56,000 that are really within a close proximity where they might walk downtown. And we're sort of defining that as downtown restaurant residents between, 0.5 miles to 1.5 miles away.
Yeah, and this is also, I'm sure, why so many consultants recommended more downtown density with housing, and that is now going on, and people are really pursuing that. But again, that's going to take a while to get into place. So.
Yeah, and that's one thing as we go through this. Housing is a critical aspect that we need to build downtown. I mean, there were 3 things that all the consultants have always talked about. One was housing, increasing density. The other one was improving the permitting planning process, and the third one was economic development.
Yeah.
And, housing is critical, and we believe housing is critical. But as Amy, as you said, it's going to take years for housing to come online and to have an economic impact. So that's why, from our perspective, economic development in the short term really needs to focus on business retention and business recruitment. So we need to create businesses downtown to draw people into downtown. We need to create an elevated experience that delivers on the needs of the visitors and the needs of the residents alike.
Well, and also it creates jobs, it creates sales tax that pays for city services. I mean, a lot of the conversations about housing are not factoring in the fact of job growth, sales tax, and all the other things that a downtown core provides.
Right. The one other thing, which we're not going to dwell too much on this chart, but I wanted to point out in terms of the median household income, and this was an interesting aspect of what we're finding is that, you look at Santa Barbara, in general, our median household income in the city and the surrounding area is on par, maybe a little bit lower than some of the other cities. But you see within the downtown population, it is significantly lower than outside the city. And that has an outsized impact on the economy in the downtown sector. We have a lot of high net worth individuals that are 2, 3, 4, 5 miles away. So we have to think about their behaviors and think about how do we draw them to downtown to help support the businesses that we have.
Yep.
Because based on the mix that we have right now, it does not look like our downtown population can actually support the entire downtown district.
Yep.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, from a demographic standpoint, we have some challenges. From a psychographic standpoint, we actually are fairly well positioned. I'm not going to go through this in depth, but some of the key data points here is that we have a fair percentage. I think about 46% of our total resident population are in the top 6 psychographic segments. And in case anybody has some questions between demographics and psychographics.
You want me to give you my example of demographic
psychographic? Yeah, I can do it. Go ahead, Damien.
Oh yeah, no, it's everybody loves it. Someone gave it to me, which is the difference between demographic and psychographic is, if we look at Howard Stern and Rush Limbaugh, they're both the same age, white males, born in the same year, make the same amount of money. That's demographics. So on a chart, they would be considered the same. Psychographics are their spending behaviors, their views, what they're going to spend their money on, how they're going to spend their time. So our psychographics and demographics are fairly strong.
All right, and so well, the psychographics are strong. Our demographics downtown.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I just want to clarify that.
You're right.
But what's important here is we do over-index on the psychographic segments, and we have the top 6 segments psychographically. I think of like 40 different segments you can look at. But what we're finding is they spend a significant more money on apparel, on entertainment, and food and beverages. So we have to remember that when we're thinking about downtown, and we have to think particularly about the mix of businesses because they are spending a tremendous amount on entertainment. So as we start to recruit businesses or we're thinking about what do we want an intentional curation of downtown to look like, this is a good data point to consider. Yep. Additionally, I think, one thing I think everyone needs to understand is when I talked about whether or not our population can support downtown, there are lots of studies that talk about what is the minimum threshold to support a thriving business. This was a study that was done in Washington, D.C. And I know people are saying, well, Washington, D.C. is a larger city, it's an urban environment, it's not necessarily applicable to Santa Barbara. This study was actually done with neighborhoods and select neighborhoods within D.C. So they were looking at, okay, within neighborhoods, within small sections, how do you support local businesses like goods and services or food and beverage, or general merchandise. And it may be hard to see, but the short end of this is, or the short story here is that our population level is just on the cusp of being enough to support some of these businesses. But what's interesting is our median household income is well below where it should be. Additionally, our daytime population, our pedestrian counts, and our vehicular traffic counts are probably not where they need to be to really support all the different kinds of businesses downtown. And this is critically important because we are making decisions downtown about the nature of State Street, the promenade, and what we want the future to look like. We have to plan for the future to support a diverse group of businesses. I know there was an article recently about State Street becoming a food court. And I'm really happy that downtown and the food businesses are doing well in the pandemic. We're doing well enough. But as we move forward, we can't forget that State Street is a diverse group of businesses downtown, and that if we are helping one group of businesses, we may be hurting another. So we really need to look at what is realistically a minimum threshold to support our businesses. And just a factoid here, if we're looking at food and beverage, typically a food and beverage business needs a fairly large population to be supportive. So I think that it was 45,000 residents within a half mile. It was about 60 pedestrians passing per hour by, and then 7,500 vehicles passing per day to really be sustained. It doesn't mean that they can't be sustained up and down at different times, but to really be a thriving business, that's the minimum that we need. And so we should really ask ourselves, are we achieving those minimums right now? And I would argue that in some cases, maybe not. The other factor, which is interesting that we have to consider, is the significant commercial footprint that Santa Barbara has. Many people may often have heard State Street is too long, it's too many storefronts, and that may or may not be true. It is a long commercial district, and it's an enormous commercial footprint for our residency. So depending upon how you cut it, we have anywhere from 1.8 million square feet to 3.1 million square feet of downtown commercial space. If you really were to dice it up a little bit more specifically, we can take about an estimate of 1.8 million square feet of classic retail space. So the businesses like the Plum Goods of the world. If we look at even that lower amount, that 1.8 million square feet, only 570,000 square feet of that can really be supported by the residents in Santa Barbara overall. I think there was a study done in terms of by the University of Wisconsin about, what's the percentage of square feet that can be supported by one household or one resident. And it calculates to about that. So what that means is we have about 1.2 million square feet of retail-oriented commercial space that has to be supported by our visitors or our daily workers. Or we have to start thinking about how do we change the nature of that business. Maybe it's non-retail, or we start to look at mixed-use purposes.
Well, yeah, let me just interrupt you, Keith, because this is a really key point to talk about. I think because we're in our own bubble, because whenever we have conversations in Santa Barbara with Santa Barbarans, our natural tendency is to talk about locals being downtown, locals shopping downtown, locals eating downtown. That's totally important, but I don't think enough people are understanding how our downtown cannot just be supported by locals. It should be supported more by locals, yes, but this kind of information is what's really fascinating to me, that we really need visitors and daily workers and all the other, and that's how we have to look at the business mix, is how is it serving all the different constituents.
Yeah, and I've been using the terms constituents, and I realize that maybe that's my
too political.
So what I mean by constituents are, yes, the residents, I mean the daytime workforce, I also mean visitors, and then I also mean business owners, because we have to look at it from that perspective, that they're all stakeholders in the future of downtown.
And I know we're not going to get into it today, but just slicing and dicing what a company is looking for if we're going to bring them to Santa Barbara. So then looking at from the prospects perspective. So there's so many different angles we have to look at when we're putting this together.
Right.
Yeah.
The final point that I want to make on this idea of a commercial footprint is the nature of a lot of the retail space that we have. State Street was configured at a time when you had narrow storefronts and sort of a deep footprint within the actual storefront itself. Yeah. So you have a large retail space that is narrow, and you may have a second floor, or you may have a basement. And oftentimes what happens is you have additional sort of a footprint that you may not need. And that does complicate bringing or recruiting businesses downtown that may not need that much space. Again, we have to think about, with the businesses we are bringing downtown, are there businesses that would need that extra square footage, or what do we do with that extra square footage?
Right, and Diana's a perfect example of this. I can't wait to hear from her, but one more minute, Diana, we're getting to you.
One more minute. The only other thing that I want to talk about is mobility, access, and behaviors. This is also something that's really critical, because one of the assumptions for everyone is, if you build it, they will come. And that isn't always the case. If we look at where our population is, 88% of it lives outside of anywhere between 0.5 to 5 miles outside of downtown. Once you get to about a mile away, the majority of those people are going to be driving to downtown. The good news is we have a fair number of parking lots and garages. 67% of them are actually above 800 of State Street. So we start to view, State Street almost as a bifurcated street. The upper state is really starting to become a little bit more visitor oriented, and the upper state is resident oriented. Lower state, you can start to think about it as almost more of a visitor oriented. Something else we wanted to bring up is, the average pedestrian does not walk that far. You may have different experiences where you say, yes, people walk the length of State Street, but realistically, an average pedestrian walks anywhere from 0.25 miles to 1.25 miles in a continuous retail area. And that will have an enormous impact when you start to look at the map of State Street, which I'll show to you next.
Yeah, and this also gets to the sustainability aspect to me, because when we had the shuttle or the electric shuttle, we were able to flow people up and down. I'm not saying that was successful or that it's the answer, but we do need to look at how sustainably we can flow people from the different areas from the waterfront up and back.
Right. And also, if we are going to plan or have an intentional creation of downtown, where do you put certain businesses and where do you focus your efforts?
Yeah.
The final point I want to make, and then we'll move on, is about biking, because I know biking is figuring fairly significantly into a lot of our plans. I love biking. In fact, I just did Gibraltar last week. I go everywhere on my bike. The issue is biking is only a small fraction of mobility. It does not represent the majority behavior, at least of Americans right now. And based on a lot of studies that we've seen, about I think 10 or 12 different studies, bikes have a neutral to even a negative impact on classic retail. So we have to keep that in mind in terms of if we are going to lean into biking as a major source of mobility downtown, what are the businesses that are going to thrive in that nature, and what are businesses that are going to suffer with that nature of mobility? Yeah. This is an interesting little chart, and this sort of brings this idea of mobility to life. So if we're just talking about pedestrian behaviors and what are the practical implications of pedestrian behaviors, let's look at this from, let's say, the visitor point of view. If a day tripper or even an overnight person is staying downtown at the Californian, or they're coming into the Amtrak station, if you look at what the average distance someone will walk is about 1,500 feet before they start to look for other transportation, unless they're distracted by a great continuous retail street or they have a wonderful time. Mm-hmm. What that means is a lot of our visitors that are really focused in the downtown beach area don't often travel that far upstate. And when they do, they start to get into the 400 block, or they get to the 101. And they start to think about, well, is this really somewhere where I want to go? Is that somewhere where I want to explore? From that point, if they know Santa Barbara, they may want to go a little bit further into the restaurant and bar area, or perhaps they're even going to McConnell's. And what's interesting is they'll walk about 3,000 to 6,000 feet if they really are interested. Mm-hmm. So at the maximum distance that the average pedestrian walks, you're basically getting to the Apple store. You're basically getting to the part in Santa Barbara at the 900 block to 1,000 block where we have our greatest number of vacancies. So what we're faced with right now is, at least from a visitor standpoint, we have an experience of funk zone to the bar district, and then you get to sort of an isolated area of no storefronts and no businesses. So we're starting to see that bifurcation of state happen naturally just because we have vacancies in those areas. Mm-hmm. So there are some really practical implications for businesses on upper state and on lower state based on our vacancies. And then how we fix that is something that we need to think about when we start to do this recruitment effort.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the last point before we want to turn over to Diana is we've started to really look at Santa Barbara as not a monolith. And I think that's one of the challenges that we found in a lot of the studies previously is all the economic development reports that we got, for the most part, with the exception of COSMA, really talked about downtown district as one area. Well, that is not the case. That's not the way to look at Santa Barbara. We have to really look at the different districts that exist. And we sort of identified 11 zones within Santa Barbara where we can start to say there's a microeconomy, or they have unique challenges, or both.
Yeah, can you blow up that one that has the different zones on it?
Sure.
Okay.
So,
this one, yeah.
Yeah, so let me explain how we sort of define these zones. So we really talk about the composition of the zone. So what type of businesses are in that area? Mm-hmm. What businesses are clustered there? Also, is that zone really delivering on the needs of all of residents and visitors? And then ultimately, what is the time in which the businesses are operating? Because that has a huge impact on whether or not that zone will be self-sustaining or sufficient, throughout the day part. And let me give you an example of some of these zones. If you look at the 800 to 1,000 block right now, you can see that's in red. That's in red because that actually represents, I think, about 60 to 75% of our total vacancies in downtown right now. Almost the entire length of the west side of the 900 block is vacant. A good portion of the 1000 block is vacant, and then the 800 block is now also starting to have troubles. So that is really representing a major problem area for us. Whereas there are some bright spots in Santa Barbara, there's no doubt. The 1200 to 1300 block businesses are still repopulating that area. While we do have vacancies, there are things happening.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to ask you a question because about that point you just made, which Matt Riley just asked a question in the chat. Does the promenade concept hurt mobility to the 900, that problem area you're talking about, even more than before?
In to a degree, yes, I would say it does. I would say that it hurts a little bit in terms of right now the businesses that were suffering there were retail. I would not say that the promenade was the cause of their pain. I would say COVID was really the cause, and that's why the businesses are closing down. But as we start to rethink what needs to go into the 900 block, if we have bike lanes and it's closed down, it will be very difficult to attract retail businesses to that area.
Yeah, certainly. I would never open Plum Goods on a shut down street. For me, that wouldn't work for enough foot traffic.
Right.
And someone else asked the same question. Jonathan, I can answer that. Is there a concentration of property ownership in the red areas? I.e., is there an issue with the landlord? There's actually at least 10, if not more, different landlords on that block. So I can't speak to that. I do know that the building I was in has a lot of vacancy, and in part due to the landlord, I would guess. But Forever 21 on the corner left within the first week, left in April, far before the promenade came into play. So, and that didn't have to do with the landlord. So I think it's a combination of issues. But anyway, go ahead.
To be honest, a lot of the retail businesses were at risk prior to COVID. COVID put the nail on the coffin.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, Keith. I forgot. I mean, we forget that we were, well, I should know because I'm one of them. So our small business community was just horrifically hard hit by the Thomas Fire and the mudslides, and we were already brought to our knees. So then this, the continued decline of State Street was going on as well. And then the pandemic hit, but it was already, not doing well.
But I want to say, and I think this is probably a good segue out of my presentation to the other one, but perhaps traditional retail and big, the big department stores, they may be hurting, but innovative retail or diversified retail or vertically integrated businesses that do not only the sourcing of all their, of their goods, the manufacturing, distribution, those types of businesses are doing okay because they've been able to diversify both retail and online businesses.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to look at retail beyond just the traditional sort of clothing shop. And
again, as we know from the data we've looked at or I can speak to it from my own network, is that retail is doing quite well. The stores that I work with that are not on State Street, that are in San Luis Obispo or Ojai or other places that, by the way, also haven't shut down their street. I can't speak to that, but they're having some of their best numbers ever. So I also want to disabuse anyone of the notion that retail's not doing well in Santa Barbara because of Amazon or just the pandemic. That's just simply not proven to be true in other areas. It is definitely part of the State Street problem that we're trying to address with this initiative. So I interrupted you again, Keith. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is there's obviously a lot more data behind it, but one of the studies originally done in 2017 and echoed both in Cosmont and then more recent studies is we really need to curate these zones and attract magnet businesses. So businesses that will attract constituencies downtown.
Yeah.
The constituencies that we want, to be honest, in the short term, are visitor constituencies and high net worth residents that we're going to be willing to come down to support these businesses. The ones that are spending the 20 to 30% more on apparel or the 50 to 80% more on food. So it's really finding that magnet business, and the ideal business that we really want is not only just a business that brings shoppers and brings people to spend money, but also brings a daytime workforce. Because that will sort of be, a bang for our buck in terms of we're bringing more people downtown that are not only just shopping there, but they're working there and then spending there.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. What else do I need to ask you? What's next before we go to Diana? Because that's something that I do want to touch on, which is again, well, can you speak briefly before that to the types of businesses that we're looking at to recruit? Because Diana's a perfect example of that.
Sure. We've identified a number of different businesses to really prioritize. We're not going to ignore any business, obviously, or any sector, but really we're looking at diversified food and beverage. So really providing food and beverage services that are across the spectrum of day parts. So those that do morning, noon, and night, as well as different levels of cost and new concepts. And that last point is probably critically important in terms of distinct, regional, and new, because I think that is essentially what the residents are looking for. It's also, frankly, what visitors are looking for. Visitors coming to town and want a Santa Barbara experience. They don't want to come to town and go to the same restaurant they've gone, whether it be New York or in LA. So it's really quite important that we think about distinct and unique and even regionally based.
Yeah, excellent. So with that, I would love to hear from you, Diana, about your very exciting kitchen project and where you're at with that and how you came up with it and the status of it.
A lot of questions. Thank you, Amy, for the time today.
When do I get to go? When's it open?
For those who don't know me, my name is Diana Pereira, and I have a few businesses in town, most notably the Impact Hub. I was the founder that launched that, starting the process in 2014. I also have Balance Financial Management. I also have Goleta Coffee, which is a coffee shop off of Turnpike. So food and restaurant area, feeling the pandemic. And my personal background has always been in small business, venture capital, private equity, and entrepreneurial type activities. And stemming from sort of the why and how this all created, back in 2014, when the idea for Impact Hub began, it was trying to break down obstacles for people starting businesses and launching new companies. And what is the same today, that pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, is that small businesses still have obstacles to start. Yeah. And it existed even pre-pandemic. There's capital that's required, there's knowledge, there's so many different variables to launch a business and stay in business. Yeah. And so my goal was to help businesses launch and stay in business. Now we have a pandemic, which is adding more obstacles, but the root issues about the business side of it are still there. Think about what we need in our community to allow businesses to arrive downtown, create something, and be thriving, is to come up with these innovative models to lower those obstacles to launch a business and lower the obstacles to stay in business. So that is our focus. I love all things food. I'm excited that this concept is taking sort of my background on Impact Hub and finance and shared businesses and bringing it to our food ecosystem and to our downtown area. I've been following and part of the food action plan that's been in Santa Barbara for many years, launching way back with the Orfalea Foundation. And there was a meeting that we had about a year ago, and talking about some of the challenges, not only with food entrepreneurs, but stretching beyond that ecosystem, where it involves the farmers, those that are employed in these type of industries. We have to recognize that there's our system is not so much silos, but as Keith mentioned, there's a diversity of businesses that are required to create a thriving ecosystem downtown. Yeah. So when there's one impact in the ecosystem, everybody gets affected. So it's important to recognize that. So the food action plan, from a philanthropic perspective, has focused on these challenges within the food system. And there was this moment where I realized, here's the challenges that exist. I know how to solve those challenges from an entrepreneurial perspective. And simultaneously was connected to Chris Sharapa, who owns Mesa Burger. Many of you might know Mesa Burger is a thriving burger place. He also owns Lighthouse Coffee and now the tap room. And he was recognizing another need in our community within the food industry, where he was getting calls on a regular basis looking for a shared kitchen. Entrepreneurs trying to launch an idea, but couldn't. Because when we think of a regular business, you have hurdles, but then you add food and now you have health department and capital, and your expenses and issues just sort of increase. So we decided to team up and launch what I'm extremely excited about, this bold project that's focused on disrupting the food industry and merging the shared economy with our food system in Santa Barbara. And so we're launching a shared community kitchen blended with a public market or food hall and a culinary incubator. And the goal is to drive entrepreneurship downtown, to support our local farmers so that we're consuming the food that we grow here.
Oh yeah, tell that statistic you said when we first met. I couldn't believe it.
So the Food Action Plan Committee, now called Food Action Network, did a study a few years back, and it stated that 90% of the food that we grow in Santa Barbara is exported out of our community, and 90% of the food that we consume is imported.
It's insanity.
So that just doesn't make sense. If we're trying to create a thriving community for Santa Barbara, purchasing from our local farmers, purchasing from our local businesses, and being involved in so many small businesses, particularly the food and restaurant business, it is hard to say, I'm going to make a choice to purchase from a local farmer.
Right, when it's maybe more expensive.
It's more expensive. It's not as easy. I can tell you that for the Goleta Coffee Shop, which we have made a commitment to only purchase locally, that my business partner purchases from 20 different vendors.
Yeah.
Pickles and the different farmers, and she goes to the farmers market twice a week. Part of her job is just sourcing local products, whereas it's so much easier for a restaurant to get a list from a Cisco or a large distribution network, check all the boxes. I don't care where produce comes from, just make sure it delivers every single day. And it's less expensive.
Yeah.
So, again, another challenge that just exists in business for making the right decisions, a thriving economy.
Yeah.
So that's another, again, one of our core focuses is how do we make that easier for businesses to make the right decisions? So we're supporting the local farmers, our local agriculture, and bringing in our community so that we're creating a memorable experience. So with any business, it's not just about the idea and the infrastructure, but do people want it? Is there a market need? Will you have consumers? And how do you have consumers sticky so that your business is sustainable in the long term?
Exactly. Yeah.
The incubator is focusing on the entrepreneurs, the education for employment, but also creating great experiences for consumers who will want to come to this location because they will not be able to get that experience anywhere else.
Yeah.
And focusing on the philanthropic side and the impact side, because I believe strongly that you can do business, make money, and do good at the same time.
Yes, so do I, sister.
Walk the walk and talk the talk. And it is possible. It is very, very possible. And so we can focus on areas of food waste, tackling that in our community, employment training and education, food insecurity, and just the general environmental impact of what it takes to run a food business. Particularly today with everything moving toward takeout, plastic, single-use containers just going out. Nobody wants, I mean, you can't in the takeout economy have things that are reusable. It's possible, but it is very, very challenging. Also, something that we're trying to tackle at Goleta Coffee and simply cannot, because it's hard to find reusable containers that people will actually bring back. So we have these environmental impacts with what's happening. These are all things that we will tackle with this business. And what's great is that we came up with this idea and concept a year ago, and it was rock solid. The demand was there. It was incredible. And now, post-pandemic, that demand has only increased. The need for an environment for all sorts of entrepreneurs to be able to launch something at a lower cost, increase their revenue, their net income in their pocket, and have this impact in our community. So, it's I should mention, Keith had said there's the storefronts on Santa Barbara have these narrow,
and like a bowling alley.
And kind of a side note, when I looked for space to where we'd put the impact hub, we saw the space at 1117 State Street, and it has a second level and a basement, and it was huge, and it couldn't be rented for over a year. And I looked at it and said, this is perfect for an entrepreneurial environment. The courts of this space are great. And so the space that we have for the Kitchen 530 project is at 530 State Street. It also has a narrow storefront, very long. It's 11,000 square feet. concept is we will have a shared kitchen, community kitchen in the back. So we have 10 hot kitchens, 10 cold kitchen, baking areas, a show kitchen, an area for programming and teaching and education, and then a front area using the narrow space on State Street for a public restaurant, retail space, and an area to be able to showcase our food entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So it's not just the restaurant side of the business, but it's the wholesale side of the business for those that are creating food products, maybe shipped at a local store. Sorry, my son just walked in. I apologize.
No, what I'm really encouraged by, and one of the questions we've gotten with this business recruitment plan we have is, first of all, we talk a lot about how recruitment is retention, like what you just said. When you bring in an exciting concept, everyone around you thrives. So recruitment and retention are so well aligned, and also that this is a great time to do this, not only with the vacancy rate, but there's a huge need. And then we also want to do this similar thing with doing kind of a, entrepreneur hubs of different little makers and different things we can do up and down the street. So it sounds like
and what's incredible about this is that it's, a year ago, I think this is such a novel idea, and here's how the business model is created. But at the end of the day, I'm not the only one doing this. We are not the only one doing this.
Yeah.
There is a group called SCA Entertainment, I think New York or Los Angeles, Sam Nazarian, and he launched a C3 division called Creating Culinary Communities, which is blending a food hall, mobile takeout, ghost kitchen concept. In 138 locations in the next 12 months.
That's amazing.
Of his restaurants closed simultaneously to now launching this cloud kitchen concept.
Yeah.
Cloud kitchens and ghost kitchens are skyrocketing today. Co-working was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's this booming industry that is fueled by the pandemic. I think it was needed pre-pandemic, but it has some extra fuel now.
Yeah.
And so the ex-founder of Uber, I believe, Travis, has spent $130 million launching cloud kitchens. There's, again, ghost kitchens is the other term for it, also launching throughout. So this is a local community version of one. The difference about the cloud kitchens is they're not public facing, so they're 100% takeout. And I think for a community like Santa Barbara, we need each other. I think there's a place for actually coming together and working in a space and collaborating and focusing on our local farmers. It's not just about the takeout. And so that's how I believe we are very different and customized for our community.
We have a couple questions, if I can interrupt you, which is,
sure.
Did you look at different areas off of state, and why did you ultimately choose state? And also, has the traditional financing been more difficult to get, or gotten easier to get, or harder since COVID?
Okay, so let me see if I got all those questions answered. So we are not looking off state for our first location. So the second location will be off state. And so in launching a business, we can have a great idea and create food, but if there's nobody there to buy it, then the entrepreneurs are not going to succeed. So being on State Street, in my opinion, was essential to creating that thriving business. So we have someone that's going to create, for lack of a better word, some cookies, something local to Santa Barbara. We want to be able to have the storefront to be able to put them on the market and say, we can sell your product.
Yes.
There might be a great chef with a great idea, but they may not have the skill set that's needed to run a business, which is often the case because it takes a few different skill sets that not everybody.
It's the same as the artists and the people I worked with. Yeah,
absolutely.
The most talented person in the world and not understand business. Yeah.
So we're filling that gap of saying, you do what you do great. We will give you the opportunity to sell it. And if it sells, then now you have that market validation simultaneously. Yeah. So super low cost to entry, similar to the Impact Hub model, where there's not a huge buy. You don't have to buy equipment. You don't have to sign long-term leases. You pop in, you try your concept. If it works, great, grow it, move out to a larger location or stay, whatever. But being able to focus on removing those obstacles. And so being on State Street needed to be there for the market side of it.
Yeah.
Now, as a company may grow, and let's say cookies are taking off and that volume needs to be had, then that needs to be happening at a different location. can be in Goleta at a place half the rate off State Street, where we can be more volume production.
Right.
But this is about the culinary incubator. This is about launching something from nothing, or sadly, those that have had to close their doors, giving them an opportunity to re-enter the market by removing those cost obstacles.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we have so many more questions.
Another question about funding. Yes.
Question about financing, and then could you speak to the potential wraparound business support a group? Could you speak to the potential wraparound business support a group such as Kitchen 530 could provide to aspiring food businesses? From Shakira.
Oh, yes. So again, there's great entrepreneurs out there and people with ideas for a business, but it takes other skill sets. There's marketing and branding and finance and distribution and food safety and co-packing and all sorts of things. And again, we need to remove those obstacles so that when somebody comes in and says, this is my idea, how do I make this happen? We will provide those business support areas to be able to ensure that their business goes from point A to point C, to get them to the next level and fill in those gaps. Those technical resources that a business needs.
Well, that's above and beyond then providing a space or a shared kitchen. I mean, that's providing a complete business incubator, it sounds like.
Yeah, so, and that's kind of a good point. So we've heard about concepts where people are sharing a space. I'll use the public market as an example.
Yeah.
And then traditionally public markets, everywhere. It's a physical space and it is shared, so to speak, but it's really more cohabitation.
Yeah.
Real sharing involved other than some physical real estate.
There's no real synergy involved. Yeah.
And there's no synergy. And what's different about a truly shared business is that we're sharing everything. We are sharing the employees, we are sharing the marketing, we are sharing the business support, we're sharing some of the sales, we're sharing some of the expenses, we're sharing the infrastructure of the business, which lowers everybody's cost. Which increases the cash in their pockets. And I mean, it's a win-win. I believe in shared business more than anything.
I do too.
I've been focused on it for the last 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
It really works. It is more complicated, which is why more people don't do it. It's easier just to go into a space and segregate it into spaces and everyone kind of runs their own show. Going into a truly shared space like this is what is different. And that's the business model that we've built. So when it comes to the business side of this as a model, it is profitable for the investors, it's profitable for the users and the members, and it allows us to be able to work with others on the collaborative impact. So I think Shakira had also sort of mentioned about background support, and it's not just the technical, but also the collaboration with some of our nonprofits in town and other collaborators doing good work. So I mentioned the food action plan that started many years ago, but there are challenges that as a business, I think we can tackle, but we will tackle them better if we can collaborate with some of the organizations that have been working on it. So food waste, for example, is a big one. So there are groups that are trying to focus on that. I think we can add technology and experience to help accelerate that. Organizations working on food insecurity, and I think we can add to that. We're bringing a physical location for businesses to collaborate around. It's exactly what happened with the Impact Hubs years ago. But this is now kind of first and foremost with what's happening in our environment today. And,
it's a perfect, I mean, you're just the shining star of what we're trying to talk about with this business recruitment but you're saying it in a way I even better than we've said it, which is that with this economic driver, you can serve so many needs. You can serve the job growth, you can serve the incubation of business, you can serve the nonprofits. I mean, when you have a successful, and that's what Sustainable Change Alliance is all about, you can make money and invest in something that will be profitable and that also has all these other community benefits, and you can do it in a way that is ethical and responsible. I mean, all of those messages is, to me, exactly, I mean, it's your passion, it's my passion, but it also is perfectly on brand for Santa Barbara. It's who I believe our town is and should be as the home of Earth Day. We can be a role model for economic, environmental, and cultural sustainability. I think we should be. I mean, I think that's what our downtown should be. And with this vacancy rate, we have an opportunity to repopulate it in a way that does that. So
you mentioned a question that I forgot to answer about funding and how that has been with this.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge. it is. So when I started Impact Hub, it took 2 years to raise money for that.
Yeah.
And the questions was, there's no way you can do that on State Street.
Mhm.
It's impossible. You'll never find real estate that's affordable.
Yeah.
It really wants to work together in a shared environment. And it was too much for people to get their hands wrapped around.
Yeah.
I hope that we've gone past that today. We recognize, wow.
Yeah, what is the inspiration for
Innovated.
desperation, or what's the Chinese quote about being the inspiration for change?
Yes. It can work. And so I mentioned Sam Nazarian, who's launching 138 hubs, food halls and so forth. He has capital to make all this happen like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need in Santa Barbara is for investors to come together and say, this can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a part of this to make this happen.
Yeah.
I don't come from an independently wealthy family. I
Right.
came from small business owners,
Right.
born and raised, parents working more than 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
12 hours a day. As a small business owner, I
Mhm.
had it in my DNA.
Yeah.
But I didn't come, born with a lot of capital.
Right.
So putting everything into this business that I have, Chris is putting things in that he can contribute. We do have investors on the private investors that are on board. But in order to make this work, we need more capital at the table and we need more collaborators.
Yeah.
So this huge vision of what we can accomplish, and I know it's doable, but I'm one person, Chris is one person. We have other team members, but we're a small team.
Yeah.
These are really big initiatives. To solve food waste in Santa Barbara is more than what we can tackle alone.
Yeah.
We're able to solve the food insecurity and being able to take the produce from our farmers and turn it into meals, that's more than what we can handle.
Right.
Of the business. So it takes those collaborations to be able to achieve my grand visions. But I think we have a great community. We have wonderful people that I think can get behind something like this.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. And I'm going to throw back to Keith for a second. And can you put in the chat to everyone, please, Diana, how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out how they could invest in this, how they can get more information, if you can put your email or your best contact information in the chat for everyone. And Keith, I think that dovetails right with what we would say as a wrap up, which is we also want to do what you're doing in this space for the entire street, which is going to take a lot of funding and support. So any final words, Keith?
Right. I mean, we're in the very early stages of establishing this economic development partnership.
Mhm.
We're just starting to understand through that, minimal amount of data analysis, what needs to happen. What's clear is it needs to be a sustained intervention. So while we're talking about recruitment and retention now, those near-term wins are going to beget long-term successes. But in order to do so, it's a sustained intervention. So we really need to understand that this isn't something we're going to do for 6 months. I mean, this is years and years of work to increase the density downtown through bringing magnet businesses, but also looking at what's the right business mix to bring in and how do we elevate that experience and bringing more business owners or entrepreneurs like Diana to downtown to open their businesses, because it's
to make it easy for them, like we were
Right.
talking about. It's that hand-holding of getting you through planning and permitting, making sure if you need a mentorship or funding, we get you to that. Making this economically, culturally sustainable means we have to do a lot more than people did in the past, where a commercial broker just took a phone call. This
Right.
is just a much bigger,
right. And right now there is no entity to call. Who do you call? I mean, Nina
Yeah.
Johnson at the city, you might, who's going to really help you get established?
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's so important that there's an entity that can do both public and private, that
Yeah.
can actually connect you to the right people and do the networking for you.
Yeah.
It's such a critical component that's overlooked on almost any economic development, is that human touch. That really,
Yeah.
that people like you
and the local that you and I both
Yeah.
live here, and where all the people involved with live here. It's not an outside, it's a gig. Okay, well, we've run out of time. We could go on all day. I would love to talk more, but for now we're going to wrap this up. And thank you everyone who attended, and thank you so much, Keith and Diana, for your passion and intelligence and data and everything you're doing. And if you are a member or sponsor, we're having a little after party next. You can log into that if you're already a member or sponsor. Talk a little bit more about what we want to see downtown. But for now, thank you to all our sponsors and board members, and we will see you next time, or see you at the after party, unless Stephen has anything else. Stephen?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.